Well, if you think back to the traditional landscape of 30 years ago, you had a green lawn and then you had a row of boxwoods in front of your house, and that was basically it. And if you think about that from a bee's point of view, there's no food there. There's nothing to eat. So why would you want to hang out in that lawn? Look at it from the bee's point of view.
Yeah.
There's no food in a landscape like that. And, you know, our views on home landscaping have changed in recent years because people want to help pollinators and butterflies, and they want to attract birds. And so we're seeing a trend with less lawn and less just boxwoods and more kind of a mixture of different types of plants. And I often hear, well, you know, I like a traditional landscape, a traditional landscape look, but you can still have a traditional landscape look and have plants that are going to be beneficial for the environment as well.
Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for another episode of At Home with Emily, a podcast about creating a life you love. I am so glad you're here with us today. My name is Emily Wood. I'm your host, and my guest today is Kelly McGowan, and Kelly is a very skilled and seasoned horticulturist. Today, Kelly and I were talking about what did we really want to focus on when it comes to the design side of things and when it comes to your lawn and residential lawns. And there is a relatively new idea out there that you may have seen around town, and it's the idea of native plants. Right. What would naturally grow here in the Ozarks? What is not something that we trucked in from several states away and tried to make it survive and very water intense and all the things? But what are some of the native plants that are actually beautiful that we can make work in our own landscaping, and even taking that a step further if you want? So we'll start with the native plants, and then we'll back into the idea of reimagining your landscape altogether. Right. In a way that is more natural looking, very beautiful, but it's going to look different from what you probably have now or have seen in the neighborhood, right?
Right.
And so you're going to help walk us through that.
Yes.
And I do not pretend that this is my area of expertise, and that is why I called you and begged you to come on because you're so good with this stuff. But when we're talking about native plants, and specifically like we're looking probably Southwest Missouri, maybe down into Northwest Arkansas, but also a lot of the Midwest, they're going to have some of the same ones. What are some of the top ones that come to mind for you that you would love to see more of that you know would thrive in this area?
Right. Well, one that comes to mind is milkweed. And for those that are not familiar with milkweed, it is a native plant, native to many states in the U.S., including Missouri, and it is the only host plant for the monarch butterfly. And so the female monarch lays her eggs on milkweed plants. The caterpillars eat the foliage, and they turn into monarch butterflies. But not only is milkweed, the host plant for the monarch butterfly, the flowers are incredibly beautiful, and they're full of nectar. And so you will attract other pollinators and other types of butterflies. So not only do you have the beautiful flowers in your yard, you're bringing in, hummingbirds and butterflies and pollinators, and you can watch those as they feed on those plants.
That we like to have around.
Right, absolutely.
Now, does that need a lot of sun?
Well, there are several different types of milkweed, and there are some that do better in shady areas. Most are going to need quite a bit of sun, though, for the most part. But if you do have shade, there are some that will do better in shade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And not hard to grow?
Very easy to grow. And as a matter of fact, now that there is, a lot of people know that monarch butterflies, their population is in decline.
Yes.
Milkweed is more popular than ever, and it's easier to find than ever. So you should be able to find it easily, and it is very easy to grow.
Okay, so, and we'll circle back to that, the importance of the creatures that are relying on the plants that are supposed to be around here that we've been clearing away systematically for all of our new developments. Yeah. What is another type of plant that comes to mind? Because I know there's a couple more that are really important and pretty.
Right. One that comes to mind is our native trees. When homeowners want to plant a tree, I would really encourage them to consider our native hardwood species, oaks. Hickories, things like that. I often hear, well, if I plant an oak tree, I will never be able to enjoy it. But the reality is if you plant an oak tree and you plant it properly, and you water it and you care for it, it's going to grow a lot faster than people will realize, and you will get to enjoy it in your lifetime. So don't let that keep you from planting a native species.
It's interesting that you said that, because I remember when we bought the house that we are in now, it was a mess, and had just been neglected, and we had to tear out the remnants of what was there. We waited for a spring, and a summer to see what would come through.
Right.
And we had to start from scratch in a lot of ways. And I remember thinking at the time, well, I don't want to buy all the small plants because we're not going to ever see them.
Right.
Well, all of a sudden, a few years passed by, we did buy the small plants, and they're huge plants now, and we're having to trim them back. So it actually does happen quicker than you think.
It does. And along with that, though, look at the mature size of the tree before you plant it. Don't plant an oak under a power line or, anything like that. So make sure that you know the mature height and the mature width, and that you're giving it plenty of space to grow. But yeah, you're right. In a few years, it will grow and flourish, and you'll be able to enjoy it.
And what was the third one that you wanted to highlight?
Well, please plant native honeysuckle. Oh my goodness.
Honeysuckle.
Yes.
Okay.
So my office is at the Springfield Botanical Gardens, and I was out with a class this morning. We were walking around the park, and we have a really big problem with invasive honeysuckle in the park, as do most areas in Missouri. It is a highly invasive plant. Do not buy Japanese honeysuckle or anything that's not native. It is an incredibly invasive native.
And how do you know if it's native?
Well, so our native species will have a different leaf shape than the invasive Japanese honeysuckle, so that's one way to tell. There's also a difference in flower shape and color.
Screenshot that, take that with you when you go to the nursery or wherever you're going.
Right.
And look for that. And what does it need to grow?
So honeysuckle, our native honeysuckle, is going to need some kind of a trellis because it is a climbing, vining type plant.
And will it damage your home if it?
I would not let it climb your home. I would have like a pergola or something where it can climb and have good support, because the better support it has, the more blooms you're going to have. So keep that in mind as well.
Okay. So some type of structure.
Some type of structure, yes.
Means. Okay.
Yes.
And so if you're planting that, then honeysuckle's the way to go.
Right.
Native honeysuckle.
Native honeysuckle. And I focus on that because, unfortunately, the invasive honeysuckles are still sold at garden centers. So when you're out shopping for plants, be aware of that and don't accidentally bring one home.
You'll regret it.
You'll regret it. And so will everyone for hundreds of years.
So when we talk about reimagining your home, lawn, and landscape, okay, so we're all kind of thinking in our minds, well, what do we normally all go to? Mulch, maybe rock, boxwoods are deer friendly. We see a lot of hostas around here, and it's all planned and placed. I mean, I'm a designer, and so I know what clients are looking for the front of their homes. What are you suggesting here? How would this look different when we're talking about a lawn or landscape that is more friendly to basically our ecosystem?
Right. Well, if you think back to the traditional landscape of 30 years ago, you had a green lawn and then you had a row of boxwoods in front of your house, and that was basically it. And if you think about that from a bee's point of view, there's no food there. There's nothing to eat. So why would you want to hang out in that lawn? Look at it from the bee's point of view. There's no food in a landscape like that. And, our views on home landscaping have changed in recent years because people want to help pollinators and butterflies, and they want to attract birds. And so we're seeing a trend with less lawn, and less just boxwoods and more kind of a mixture of different types of plants. And I often hear, well, I like a traditional landscape, a traditional landscape look, but you can still have a traditional landscape look and have plants that are going to be beneficial for the environment as well.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So when we're talking about baby stepping into that, is it just a matter of adding some of those plants into what you already have?
Exactly. It doesn't have to be a huge, arduous task where you're ripping everything out and starting from scratch. Just start small, and maybe this year, maybe add 5 new plants and see how they do in your lawn, and then you can increase it over time. You don't have to do it all at once. Yeah.
And you have mentioned the monarch butterfly, which we know is struggling with finding habitats, right?
Right.
And then you've mentioned the bees, which I've heard back and forth. I've heard over the years that the bees are struggling, and then I've heard it wasn't as bad as we thought. But we do know that both of those creatures are looking for these type of plants. Why is it important for us to be a part of that and provide them somewhere to go?
Well, when we think about protecting our pollinators, a lot of times we think about large scale, like, a piece of property with 100 acres. In reality, most homes have about a quarter acre, give or take a little bit, and more acreage is owned by homeowners than any other type of land ownership in the United States. So if each one of us just put a few good pollinator plants in our home lawn, just think about the difference that could make in protecting some of these species. And you don't have to do a lot. If each of us just do a little, it can be very, very helpful.
And how important are those species to the ecosystem overall?
They're incredibly important. There's things that eat bees, and then there's things that eat those things. So they're part of the food chain, but bees also pollinate our plants that give us fruits and vegetables. So they're important for us as well.
Not to mention the honey.
Which is, yes, absolutely.
Well, Kelly, I think that gives us all a little something to think about as we're in the midst of planting season and looking ahead to what's going to grow this summer. And why not mix it up a little bit and be a part of the solution for the ecosystem too.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode of At Home with Emily. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, please be sure like and subscribe so you're notified when our next episode drops. We drop a new one every Wednesday. You can also head to aroundtheozarks.com to sign up for our daily newsletter. And you can always follow Around the Ozarks on social media. We'll see you next time.